push me to the edge. Phantom, that's alright. Inside all white, like something you ride a sled down. I just want that head. My brilliant, her man. Her brilliant, her man.
Hey everybody, this is Eric with Happy Politics. It's September 29th. We got a full palette for you today. We got a story from Betsy DeVos. She's back in the news today. We also have some news on Puerto Rico. And CHIP, the program that actually a lot of children taking part of, Children's Health Insurance Program. We're going to be discussing that. And we also have a story concerning Donald Trump. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. So one of the first stories that we're talking about is from Mother Jones. So Betsy DeVos thinks that schools are like food trucks. Yeah. That's a thing. All right, so on Thursday night at a conference on the future of school choice at Harvard University, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos continued to make friends, as she has in a slew of recent events. The cabinet member was met by a scrum of mostly silent protesters, some of whom carried signs bearing the words, "Education justice is racial justice," and "white supremacists." And that got started even before DeVos made her arguments, yet again, in favor of giving family options in what schools they should send their children to. You know, when you say options, you probably want to be a little bit cautious about that. This time, her talking points were different, though. In an intriguing bit of wordplay, school choice, she said, could be thought in the way of we think about when we eat for dinner. Yeah. Okay, so this is what she went on to say. Near the Department of Education, there aren't many restaurants. But you know what? Food trucks are started lining the streets to provide options. Some are better than others, and some are even local restaurants that have added food trucks to their businesses to better meet customers' needs. Now, if you visit one of those food trucks instead of a restaurant, do you hate restaurants? Or are you trying to put grocery stores out of business? No, you're simply making your right choice for you based on your individual needs at that time. Just in how you eat, education is not a binary choice. Being for equal access and opportunity, being for choice, is not being against anything. You know, and there was even a guy, Edwin Rios, had made a comment about this on Twitter. That school choice is like choosing a food truck. You are simply making the right choice based on your individual need. Okay, so you know what? Let me go ahead and comment on this. Okay, so food trucks are not at all even a good comparison to even make directly next to schools. Because even if you ran a system similar like that to running a food truck where you just had that ability of choice, you have a very inconsistent system of where, as she likes to phrase it, choice, she's giving power to these schools to be able to do virtually anything that they want. Even as far as food standards are concerned, when it comes to health standards, these vendors have to still adhere to particular standards in that industry. So it doesn't necessarily matter, like this argument that she's talking about, well, you know, it's just like picking pizza one day and then picking hot dogs the next day. They're all food. They still have to adhere to some degree of health standards. It doesn't necessarily matter. And this is what the situation comes down to, is that it comes down to standards. Your argument for choice isn't necessarily choice. You're actually not necessarily giving the people's choice. You're actually giving these private corporations the ability to do virtually whatever they want without government oversight or any kind of standards. The best way in order to proceed forward when it comes to public education is to not throw out the system as an entirety, but you're supposed to be able to improve upon that and make it better. And what DeVos is actually arguing is that we have to take away government regulation and pretty much allow these corporations to do virtually anything they want. And while some people may argue that that's actually for the better because less government oversight means innovation, that argument presupposes that a corporation is going to behave ethically and in a position that is to the betterment of the consumer. There's always a built-in presupposition that's always made with those arguments whenever innovation and free market comes about. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to act in your best interest. By its very nature, a corporation is supposed to make profits. That is by its very nature. Business ethics are a totally different matter, and it doesn't necessarily matter whether or not you have a free market that is completely deregulated. there are instances where too much regulation can work to the detriment of the free market. However, a free market that is unabated, that does not have any kind of regulation at all, is very foolish. And it can lead to a situation where you have, extreme instances. And it's not necessarily even extreme. We have that right now where we have monopolies. I mean, it was just in the news the other day that T-Mobile and Sprint is actually trying to do another merger, bringing us down to 3 corporations, 3 nationwide major cellular corporations. And the market has actually thrived on there being 4, but that's not what this story is about. I was just bringing up an analogy. All right, so the next in the story, we're gonna talk about CHIP, the program that is actually called the Children's Health Insurance Program. Now, this is from the LA Times. Time's up. As the CHIP expires unrenewed, Congress blows up a chance to save health care for 9 million children. All right, as the article reads, advocates for children's health started worrying months ago that congressional incompetence would jeopardize the nation's once indisputable healthcare success. The Children's Health Insurance Program, which has reduced uninsured rate among kids to 5% from 14% over 2 decades of its existence. Their fears turned out to be true. Funding for CHIP runs out on Saturday, and no vote on establishing the program's $15 billion appropriation is expected for at least a week, probably longer. That's the case even though CHIP is one of the few federal programs that has enjoyed an unalloyed bipartisan support since its inception in 1997. The consequences will be dire in many states, which have to curtail or even shut down their children's health care programs until funding is restored. Hanging in a balance is care for 9 million children and pregnant women in low-income households. So what happened? The answer is that congressional Republicans' last harebrained attempt to repeal the Affordable Care Act got in the way. A funding bill for the CHIP seemed to go on well on its way to enactment until a week or so ago. That's when the effort to pass the egregious Cassidy-Graham repeal bill sucked the air out of the legislative room. Agreement on the bill that had been reached in mid-September on Senator Orrin Hatch and Roy Wyden. Momentum was building, says Bruce Leslie, president of the First Focus, a children's advocacy group in Washington. Then came Graham Cassidy, and we couldn't even get a meeting. No one was even taking our calls. The impacts of delays vary by states, because states are able to apply unspent CHIP money in any fiscal year to the next year. But even with the money in their coffers, can't escape the consequences of congressional inaction, because they merely can't assume that that Congress will merely get around to reauthorizing the funding. They have to start planning to shut down their programs right now or reallocate funding from other social programs. According to Medicare officials who manage CHIP from the federal end, California, Arizona, and Minnesota and North Carolina will run out of CHIP funding by December or early January. Half of the states won't make it beyond the first 3 months of 2018. Some will run out next week. And Mario on Twitter had posted a graph of some of the states and the projected times that they're going to be running out of funding. And just like the article said, like California is amongst one of them. Texas, shocker, it's not even listed on here, and this is where I live. So it's going to be very, very hard to tell on the situation. But this action on moving forward on this piece of legislation is being held up by GOP opposition in this case. And the Trump administration is pivoting right now full force to tax reform, and we are now seeing the decay of our government and a lot of the programs, and I sincerely hope that people begin to wake up and begin to look towards 2018 to start primarying some of these candidates, because unfortunately they don't necessarily have your best interest. Especially, and it boggles my mind just like how people just constantly vote in Republican after Republican after Republican after Republican. I have no idea. And you know what? The Democrats are, they're sort of a mixed bag. They're kind of half-ass bought out. I will admit that. But the Republicans, there's just no talking. There's no talking to them, which is unfortunate. It's pretty much akin to their constituents. It's just no talking to them about this situation. So I would sincerely just want to give out the message that people just need to look to 2018 and reevaluate the candidates that are running in your district and start looking to potentially being more active in your community as far as the political scope is concerned. All right, so the next story that we're going to be covering And this is going to be before we get to the Puerto Rico story. Okay, so this is actually from a website called The Conservative Fighters, and I'm sorry, this is like not a reliable source, but this is something that I wanted to bring up anyway, and there's a particular reason for this. Officers escorting President Trump crash, and Trump refuses to let Air Force One go or take off until he talks to him. Now, what I wanted to get to about this was that Eric Trump had actually tweeted this article out talking about how great of a father that he is. But you know what? I'm going to go ahead and read the article. So on Wednesday, President Donald Trump was being escorted through Indiana on his way back to Air Force One when one of the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police officers, Robert Turner, crashed his motorcycle, Blue Matters reported. People were taking pictures instead of helping the officer. Several pictures show the officer with several cuts lying next to his motorcycle on the ground. After help arrived, Turner's motorcycle was left behind on the road. The officer was rushed to the hospital and put in a neck brace and appeared to be in poor condition. But then he received a call from Donald Trump. Now, apparently, Donald Trump, before he left with Air Force One, he decided to make a phone call. And Eric Trump, his son, decided, along with other right-wing news outlets, decided to tweet this out saying, you know, how great of a president this is, you know, to hold up Air Force One, to make a phone call and check on a person. Okay. Really? Okay, guys. This is what you're going to make the basis off of is as to what makes a good president. All right. Really? He held up Air Force One to make a phone call. All right. So you know what? Let me interject here. You know what? I've been on the commercial airline before. You know, I've been in the air. And I've tried to connect to the cellular networks. Of course, that shit doesn't work. You're too fucking high up in the air. But you have this little thing called Wi-Fi. And you know what? I'm pretty sure the government has access to the technology to be able to make phone calls. So like this bullshit about, oh yeah, you know, Donald Trump held up Air Force One so he can make a phone call and congratulate the officer. Really? Really? So you're going to congratulate the president because he made a phone call? I mean, what's next? So me and the president go to the grocery store. You know, I meet up with him, and he holds the door open for me. Am I supposed to scream, you know, what a great president. He's such a gentleman. He held the door open for me. Is this the cult of personality that you guys have built upon? That you're willing to, like, give him credit for virtually little trivial bullshit that doesn't necessarily matter. Or some random lady meets him, I don't know, in a restaurant, and there's like one bathroom, and she said, oh, the president allowed me to go to the bathroom first. Such a gentleman and such a nice guy. Oh my God. Like, this is, the bar has been set so low for what makes a good president. Like, let's not talk about the cult of personality. I don't give a shit about his personality so much. I don't care about stupid shit like that. Not really. Just, dude, let's talk about legislative moves that you're making, and then we can talk about something substantive, and then not this bullshit about, oh, you know, president made a phone call. Yeah, but woohoo. Yeah, okay, yeah, great, good job. So the final story that we're going to be getting to is the story about Puerto Rico. And the situation in Puerto Rico was actually not looking pretty damn good because it took roughly a week for aid to be brought over there. And it came to, and it's sort of a fractured situation. There were multiple increments depending upon which organization who brought over the aid. But there was an article in The Hill concerning that there was not enough troops in Puerto Rico. This is from The Hill. The Defense Department has not sent enough troops and vehicles to the hurricane-ravaged Puerto Rico, but will soon send more, according to a 3-star general newly in charge of a coordinated military response. Army Lieutenant General Jeff Buchanan, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, said Friday morning that the Pentagon has 10,000 people helping with the response after Hurricane Irma and Maria ripped through Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands earlier this month. We are certainly bringing in more troops, Buchanan said to CNN. For example, on the military side, we're bringing in both the Air Force One, Navy, and Army, and medical capabilities in addition to aircrafts and more helicopters. All right, so I think somewhere along the line, yep, and the article even goes as far as to say like it took roughly 8 days in order for this all to transpire. That is a very long time, actually, for this to happen. And even there was even a video that came out where Carmen Cruz had some choice words for Donald Trump. So here we go.
We are dying here, and I cannot fathom the thought that the greatest nation in the world cannot figure out logistics for a small island of 100 miles by 35 miles long. So I am asking the President of the United States to make sure somebody is in charge that is up to the task of saving lives. If anybody out there is listening to us, we are dying, and you are killing us with the inefficiency and the bureaucracy. We will make it with or without you. Because what stands behind me is all due to the generosity of other people. Again, this is what we got last night. 4 pallets of water, 3 pallets of meals, and 12 pallets of infant food, which I gave them to Comerío, where people are drinking off a creek. So I am done being polite. I am done being politically correct. I am mad as hell. So I am asking the members of the press to send a mayday call all over the world. We are dying here. And if we don't stop, and if we don't get the food and the water into people's hands, what we are going to see is something close to a genocide.
So that's a very powerful speech that was made. And, you know, it was very moving in order to convey a point of the inefficiencies and like how Donald Trump was making comments about the logistics of how there's a big body of water that I think he says the Atlantic Ocean or some shit. Okay, first of all, it's the Caribbean Sea. But it doesn't necessarily matter if there's a big body of water there. I mean, Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. This has been the thing actually before you came into the administration. So, I mean, or became a part of the White House. So I don't get that excuse. Doesn't actually make any damn sense. There was a horrible planning effort, at least as far as the United States was concerned. And there was even some right-wing outlets even going as far as to say, well, you know, Puerto Rico didn't do a good job planning. Planning what? What the fuck are they supposed to plan? I mean, you're talking about an island who is a U.S. territory that is, by it being a part of the United States, is entitled to those same services, such as FEMA or the armed services, like I said earlier, that were supposed to be over there. Of course, there could be a potential situation where they're not going to necessarily be prepared. They're isolated away from everybody. So it's on the job of the U.S. government to be able to plan the logistics of the situation. And I don't buy that. I don't buy that argument from Donald Trump that it was just tough. It was just tough. No, it's not. It's not. It's a tough situation, but you were elected into this position to be the leader, and you just this lax attitude that you have of sending aid or making plans to send aid after the fact. It just doesn't work, and I don't necessarily know why people even buy into this. And he even went as far as to like tweet out like, "Oh, she's too busy like getting on TV and like getting these T-shirts and all this. You know, she's politicizing this issue." He's doing all of this, tweeting out this bullshit, and he's at the fucking golf course, like again with the fucking golfing. It's like he never fucking stops with the goddamn golfing. It's like you have no sense of responsibility of what came with this position. The Republicans would be all over Obama's ass about it. But you know what? Whenever you're elected a Republican, nobody says anything. But if it was a Democrat, the Republicans would have been all on it. Obama wouldn't be able to take a fucking piss break without being able to get some shit about that. So it's just, the hypocrisy is just so golden. But you know, the situation is getting better and better. You know, I'm going to be I've been donating a little bit of money over there myself, and I hope for the best for them.